Hi, friends. Christine from Earth Impasse here again, and I'm going to record something I wrote. It's an introduction to a talk I'm going to be having with Claudia. And so Happy New Year, January 1st, 2022. Maybe just a few thoughts on 2022. I think a lot of us are feeling this pretty deeply, and it's rising to the surface that this is a very important year. And as we've been peeling back layers and layers of the deception of through what we're going through, the truth is surfacing everywhere in the hearts of men and women all over the planet. I think our most deeply felt genetic human call is that we must stand and hold our sacred ground for our children. Many of us know that we may not be here in the near future. So everything we do, every breath we take, every word we speak, everything that we show is vital in these days coming ahead. I also feel very strongly, and I'm experiencing it again and again, there is a deep connection within our human heart and our human psyche right now. People are standing in a truth or their truth, and they are putting down others who are bringing forth another aspect or another perspective of truth. I think it's of vital importance right now for anything we're doing that we simply give allowance. The truth will show. So if somebody is an operative or somebody is spinning a tale or trying to take our consciousness into a false reality, we'll see that. But let's not just like throw everybody out that doesn't think like we think. We each have, we're like fractals. We're like from a fractured whole. Each of us has a very unique perspective. And I'm very grateful today for sharing my perspective with some very dear friends. And without them, I would only have a piece of what I know today, because I can look through their eyes, I can look through their experiences, I can share with them. And so between us, there's nothing being held back. And with that, that's my message for the new year. I'd like to read something that I wrote very spontaneously yesterday, and it will be an introduction to the conversation I'm going to have shortly with Claudia. Let me pull it up, but I need my glasses on to read it. What we were going to speak about today is the difference between what we call racial purity or bloodline versus the narrative of racial superiority, which is a very false, destructive, divisive concept. And this is what came up when I was pondering it. Many, if not most tribes, attempted to keep their bloodlines pure. There were many reasons for this: racial memory, traditions to be passed down, and a way of life to be preserved. I recalled in visions that I've had over time, okay, I'll just say that, things come to me in a visionary, auditory way, that the world was sung into existence. There existed a harmony in each geographical area, and a story was told or a song line. So the people would sing their song, and it would be passed to the next place in the realm, who would add their song to the original lines, and thus a place of great beauty arose. The occasional mixing of bloodlines was permitted, though surely it was consulted among the elders and both tribes before it was allowed. In our modern day view, this seems archaic, even barbaric, so we look upon it disparagingly without considering that there was great wisdom in such decisions. When what I will call today the pretenders or the parasitic elements were introduced, there started to be a dissonance, very small at first, but it was noticed by the great seers. With the dissonance came little waves of fear and distrust, which started spreading. Trying to locate the source of this dissonance, there came distrust of neighbor and other. It was insidious how this spread, like a creeping miasma or a shadow. This fear of other reached a high screeching pitch during different epochs of our timelines, and blaming another for this evil became the focus of the Inquisition, the church, the judges, and the other black robe types. The accusers became the authority on right and wrong, as the masses often clung to their home fires, terrified that they would have the steely finger pointed at them. How deeply embedded in our human psyche this is. Perhaps a few remained who saw how this was done, but their voices were seldom heard, only on the invisible ethers, blown by the winds, carried by the animal messengers, or sung from the highest mountaintops, was the divine spirit kept alive within this realm. If one listens deeply enough, these songs are still heard. Yeah, we're recording here, Claudia. I think we're going to tackle a subject that most people find difficult to deal with. And
It's a surprise.
Also, what it really comes to me is that there's narrative on narrative on narrative, right? And so when you start talking about Adolf Hitler, World War II, racial purity, genetic memories, and all those things, most people think that it's anti-Semitic or you're a Nazi. And the first thing I want to do is just strip away those words again. I hear so many people that, especially with what we're dealing with today, refer to it as Nazism or Nazi and have no idea how that word came into usage. And much like the word COVID, I have long felt that it is a code word or a hex word, or it so deeply gets buried in the human psyche that they're afraid to look at anything different. And so you know a little bit about the history of how that word came into existence.
I'm not entirely sure because there are various versions, but I think probably the most prominent one is that, firstly, it's supposed to be an abbreviation for National Socialist, which from a language point of view does not make much sense because you normally, if you use 2 letters per word to abbreviate something, then they would be called nasals.
Right.
But apparently it was the Allies that started to refer to the National Socialists, or the Germans in general, probably, as Nazis.
Well, I remember reading that it was a racial slur, actually, that it stood for backwards farmer type of person, that, and they just, much like, you know, there's plenty of words for different racial things, and I'm not going to say them because they're ridiculous. And so it's a propaganda word, basically. It was put in.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about that. It is propaganda. It probably is. I want to say there's at least a modicum of black magic involved because of the Z sound.
Yeah, and so then you have the other word that's always thrown out at people, which is anti-Semitic or anti-Semiticism, as if that were those two things together, it means hatred of Jews, of blaming Jews. And so,
yeah, except, I mean, how many Semitic races are there? So if you are anti-Semitic, you hate pretty much all of humanity. Now, this does not, I don't think that applies to us, any of us who are who are looking for truth.
no,
it does apply for a certain segment of the population, and that's, the ones who hate humanity, who put nanoparticles in vaccines and that kind of thing. They hate, we don't.
Right, exactly. So what came to me yesterday, and it's the work that we've been doing with a friend of ours and the work we do with several friends. And I think one of the things that is really coming home to me is that by honest, open sharing, without using slur words or propaganda words, perhaps we can open a door today. And it's an entry door. And
Yes.
what came to me was that all of this racial superiority, racism propaganda that's being, I mean, it is the agenda right now. It is to turn the races against each other. And so when I look
What
back,
there's left of races.
well, exactly. And that's a point we can get to because we're in a different time and we have to address things differently than they were in the past. But to understand where we are today, it's important to excavate what happened. And primarily and primordially, you know, you and I have been looking at our Germanic ancestry. We looked at what happened, what we call Germania, because there's a lot of information. The word Aryan, the Aryan people, who were they? What were they? Who are these bloodlines? Where is this genetic memory? How do we revitalize it in ourselves without falling into the traps of hatred and blaming other? And so the door that I kind of thought we could talk about today is there's a very big difference, and we're talking in the past because today we are not in racial purity. We don't have traditional societies anymore. We don't have geographical traditional tribes. Very few are left. And part of what's going on today is to erase those that are left. From the Aborigines to the Sami people to the Laplanders, all of these people that have somehow remained pockets that have the deep memory, not just of them, but of our creation story. And so when you look into your own genetic memories or your own genetic line, and if you can allow for that, memories come up. And so I understand, and I'm just beginning to understand that why our ancestors wanted to keep racial purity. It wasn't about racial superiority, which is part of the narrative. It was the purity of that race, because within that, on a geographical location.
Maintain memory.
Pardon?
Yeah. To maintain memory.
Right. You maintain a memory, and these memories that we don't have access to anymore, right? They're still here within the realm. They're still preserved because nothing is ever totally forgotten, because the divine spirit holds everything. But we're in a time of great upheaval at the moment. And so to try to move us away, and then I'm going to go back to Adolf Hitler, our research into what happened during not only the First World War, and that's I can recommend in some notes that I'll put out here for people that want to go down and to see what was happening there, but from the destruction of Germany after World War I and the rise of the Third Reich. And I will remind people from our other research that Reich means realm, right? That there was a very important genetic racial memory within the Germanic people and tribes. And that my feelings are that Adolf Hitler, and it's documented. I mean, I'm not going to throw out a bunch of things that's documented in many places, was to preserve a way of life.
Yeah.
It was, and so this slapped on over the top of that he wanted racial superiority. He hated the Jewish race, you know, and now I'm finding out more that, you know, the Germans German Jews that went to Israel, you know, it wasn't about that. It was a very, very deep way of living. And it was mystical almost. I have to say that, because when I fall into my memories, the search for our ancient bloodlines, the search for our truth, the preservation of what an element that allied and infiltrated most of the allies wanted to destroy.
Yeah.
So Why do you think it's so hard for people to look at this?
Well, it's programming. Like when you drum something into someone constantly. And there isn't, even now, like more than 70 years later, there isn't a week going by when the media does not mention the Nazis or Hitler or the Third Reich and so on and so forth. So it's like, it's not only drummed into everyone's memory, they are making sure that we never forget.
Mm-hmm. So,
And by never forget, I'm not talking about the truth, but what has been said since forever, because it started long before 1933.
yeah. So so here's an aspect of like being an open mind and using some critical thinking. We know, let's call the general, people that have been in the truth movement or have been looking at, many aspects of it, that we're in a propaganda war, an information war right now. It's a spiritual war. And so when we see that they malign or censor someone out there that's bringing something forward, we go, it's the Nazis that did it. But we don't stop long enough to think, wait a minute, how is it possible that one man, that lost the war, that fought with moral courage, more courage than I haven't seen anybody come forward right now in the present day with the moral courage that he had.
Mm-hmm.
And you can say right or wrong, and it's very difficult from this modern mind programming to understand or to get inside that character and the reasons that he made, the choices that he made, and what he was fighting for. So you have to discard this programming right now, and you have to go back there. But they can't see that by aligning Fauci and Bill Gates and all of these players, because they're only players, with Hitler, that they're absolutely wrong.
Well, yeah. I mean, let's face it. Have you ever seen Bill Gates behaving in any honorable way?
No,
I have.
no, because these are the purveyors of death. They're purveyors of death. And what I know from reading Mein Kampf, and what I know from speeches, and what I know from our years of research, the real impact of Germany and Hitler and the people around him was to preserve a way of life. It wasn't a death cult. And that people can't see.
That's what their downfall was, because they need, the system needs the death cult. We talked about this years ago.
Yeah. We did talk about it years ago, but I guess what I'm trying to deprogram or open up a little, like putting a key in a lock, is for people that might hear this, that they start to question this use of words that were given to them by the very propagandists, that they're still are using the same mechanism right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they repeat it and they repeat it and they repeat it. So to me, that just says that we as a collective psyche of truth tellers, or lovers of freedom, of our divine right for who we are and what we are, won't turn that key. We won't open that lock. And I think it's time. And I think it's the time that we do that.
Absolutely.
I'm not throwing, barbs at anybody, because everybody's got a perspective and everybody's got some aspect of truth out there, but they're still playing into the hands of propaganda.
Yep.
So, that's just why I wanted to have this talk with you today. And, you and I have spent endless hours of research, you more than I in certain aspects because of you're German and because you read German. So how are you seeing right now as you do research or as you look through, is the censorship across the board? How is that playing out?
It's probably one of the heaviest censorships that I've come across, even more so than the truth about the medical industrial complex. You cannot find any of the PDF files that were preserved books from the time. They are leaving out the table talks of Hitler and Mein Kampf because someone is making money. And they also, that way, they preserve the illusion of enabling scholars to find a more damaging material, let's put it that way. But anything else is pretty much gone from the internet as we know it. I've not searched through Tor. I'm just talking about the common search engines. And I mean, I don't use Google search engines for that kind of research.
No, it's pitiful. I mean, the search engines are really, it's really difficult. And even archive.org, which I use, it's harder to find things. I mean, you really have to do your due diligence. And so, with this, you saying that, and it goes along with the other work we're doing right now, which is rising within us individuals, right? Which is our memory. We all have access to it. And yet with the attempt at changing our DNA through these mRNA inoculations or injections, that's the object to me, is not only changing it, our obvious genocide attempts and the lack of the ability to procreate, taking us into the mainframe and the machine world, is they don't want us to have access. Because as many books as we can read, as many tomes of documentation, and everybody has a different interpretation also of that according to where they are in their own consciousness. So I feel like very strongly that is the compression we're under right now, is to those of us that know this, gnosis, like knowingly inside of us, to trust our own memories. And to give them life again. And it's not going to be in the same way. We are in a whole different time shift at the moment. So, we can't like go back in time, and we can't, reestablish what was once here, because somewhere, somehow in my consciousness, this all had to come to pass. And where we find ourselves is pretty much a mystery, because I think it's in the process of creation right now. And that's why I want to go back to that memory. I will call it a memory I had of the time of the creation story, and all different languages and different peoples of this realm had song lines. And I feel so like it just gives me a sense of deep breath, really, of like, this realm was sung into existence. That's why when we talk about the ancient song lines of the Aborigine, right? And how I saw it, and how I perceived that these song lines were harmonics, one together with the other. And perhaps the most important thing that we get to right now is that when the dissonance came in, and that's a word I learned from you, when you hear the dissonance, right? It's the lack of harmony. That was the infiltration. And so we have to somehow return to our own inner harmony for this to happen. And am I making sense?
Yes, completely. And I mean, the way to that inner harmony, I have no doubt, is through truth. Wanting truth and speaking truth at all times.
So let's just, not to make this real long today and overburdened, but let's go back to Adolf Hitler. Okay, the very thing that we're dealing with and what we're talking about is that he's been put up as the scapegoat of the most evil human that ever lived.
Which I find amazing because, I mean, it is pretty much common knowledge that he created the first highways, Autobahn. And the whole world has, used that as an example to make roadways. That's how we can travel easily when there isn't any COVID restrictions. But not as many know that we have to thank him for our, in Europe, rather generous holiday allowance every year. Because he was the one who insisted that people who work deserve a holiday. And they need to be able to afford to go away and look at something new in order to regenerate, in order to regain their strength that they lost by working hard. So, yeah, he was the most evil human on the planet.
Well, that's what I mean. It's just, it boggles my mind sometimes because he was for his people. He was the Fuhrer. He was the fatherhead for his people and preserving their way of right. And, the whole aspect of rural farms and all the things that our consciousness is going, we have to go there. We have to grow our own food. We have to be, our own, and all of that under this communism, because we'll call it that, the Bolshevik incursion of communism. Right? It wants to take that all away from us. It wants us to take us into an absolute collective hive mind. We all are bowing down to the authority. And so when you really look at
dependency.
Yeah. And so they say that he mind controlled the German people. Well, I think they loved him.
He stood for the diametrical opposite of what today's governments stand for. I mean, there is absolutely no doubt.
Right. So it was the preservation of the individual.
That and the preservation of moral values.
Yeah. Yeah. So all we have to see today is the degeneration that's going on around us, the perversions, the sexualizing of our children, that whole aspect of it. And, I often sit and talk to people, as you know, and often they'll say, well, he burned the books. And I'm like, yeah, what books did he burn? There's very few images of it. And as far as I can tell, it was all the pornography.
Yeah.
And so that,
when he came to power, the so-called golden 20s had just finished. So imagine the amount of pornography in those days.
Right. So if we look at that, conservationism or conservatism, right, is conserving the immoral values, is conserving the family. It's conserving the rights of the individuals for their own autonomy. And yet, when you have no tradition left, when you're a displaced person, when you're moved all over the planet, like has been going on, all the immigration it's really either due to the wars that the same people that say Hitler is evil have propagated across humanity. Yeah, those people that say he was evil, this is what they're doing. And so when you no longer have any tradition, you no longer are in your innate nation grouping, what do you look to? Then the authority. The government's going to give me this. The government's going to give me that. And
I give my soul to the government in turn. I mean, that's what's happening, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll sacrifice my child to the great god of medical tyranny,
Yeah.
So I don't know what more we can say about it in this moment. I just really wanted to get that out. It's been sitting inside of me and I've been wanting to express it in some way.
I want to offer some more food for thought on this subject, which is freely available to check, because please don't ever take my word for it. World War II, the so-called, has not finished. If you go to the UN website and read their charter, you will find 2 points. I forgot which ones they are. I think one of them is 16. But anyway, both of those clauses name Germany as the enemy, and they were not struck out of that charter. And then you have to realize there is a difference between the Federal Republic of Germany, which is a corporation, and the German realm, Deutsches Reich. It's a huge difference because one is a country, the other one is a corporation. Keep that in mind when you do research, because why has that war never finished? Why does Germany not have a peace treaty with the Allied forces more than 70 years after the alleged end of the war? Those are discrepancies that I think bear some hard thinking if you tend to believe what you read in the history books. And they are good starting points, because once you realize that you've been lied to, then you kind of start finding it easier to uncover more lies.
Yeah, well, when you're talking, and the thing that's running through me right now is looking at our ancient history and looking at the different races and each having an aspect to the whole and the harmonies. And, behind all of what's going on now is the blame game, right? The continuous blame game. And it's being directed at the Caucasian race.
Yeah.
It is, and so this ongoing narrative of white supremacy that they're so hard trying to get people to fall for, I don't think it's really working. But there's something very,
I do know people who apologize constantly for being white.
well, yeah. I mean, that's in the narrative. That's being taught in the schools. That's being taught to the children.
But yeah, just like, the Germans constantly apologize for being German, because they've, from day one, you were co-guilty for Hitler.
So if we take pause, you and I and our listener, and ponder with inside, why is that so? And maybe that answer doesn't come up easily, because it has something in my mind to do with the genetic bloodlines. And it's like if it's the need of the predatory death cult. And it's always been the need of the predatory death cult to take out the Caucasian race. I mean, it's not, for something to me, it just came up when you were talking, like there's something so foundational. And I mean foundational in a very ancient way of this creation. And I don't mean it in any superior way whatsoever. But when you have to fracture apart and blame a whole race of people with a skin color, right, for all your problems, I mean, it's an idiocy to begin with, but there's something there. And I'm not even going to speculate on that at the moment, but I would like to just put it out there.
Good call.
Yeah, so what do you see ahead this year?
Actually, and you'll probably be surprised because you've heard me say so often, I've lost all hope in humanity. I am seeing a massive uprising. Not violence. I mean, that will be there because there'll be so many people who are going to be so fucking angry. But I would say the majority will have this uprising by simply going, no, you're not going to tell me anything what I can do and I can't do. You know, it's more along those lines. Like simply, did I really give my consent to that? Nope. Okay, fuck off. Or as the Maltese are so fond of saying, kindly fuck off.
Kindly fuck off. Yeah, I perceive that too. I mean, I perceive it in the sense of when you say uprising, the uprising that I perceive is the uprising of consciousness, right? It's this, it's a swelling. It's
swelling, exactly.
Right. And how it's going to express is going to be very individual. It's going to depend on what country you're residing in. It's going to, in a lot of ways. But that's where, you know, so many of us held our line in the sand through all of this. And for those, whatever they are, would-be controllers or would-be overlords, you know, they have no weapons against that.
No.
And I think it set them off a little bit, right? So what do they have left to utilize? Brute force. Their propaganda is not working. Their lies are falling apart as they speak them. They say something and it's a lie, you know, coming out of their mouth, and they're contradicting each other. So that narrative is crumbling because it's based on such falsehoods and it's so comic book like. And they've spoken to humanity like it's infantile, right? Be good little boys and girls, and you know, we'll take care of you. And, you know,
so, like, you know, it's like you would behave to a dog,
right? Yeah, an animal, you know. And so as that's happening, but this uprising, this welling up, and I felt it so strong yesterday. It was really quite beautiful and powerful. But it wasn't. It's a collective consciousness, right? And so, or you could say it's a song. You could almost, right? And
the sound is changing, which is how I noticed it. Because, I mean, you of all people must have heard me say this 1,000, if not more times. Like, humans are so stupid. Especially over the last couple of days, there's been, from a psychic perspective, I can only say there's a new, like, it's almost like a new chord, very harmonious chord that's piping up every now and then. I can't describe it.
You speaking those words is causing this laughter and this sense of joy, because you said it, a new chord. It's a new chord. And so in keeping with that we stay, sorry, I'm coughing.
Who are you supposed to be listening to right now? You always do that.
What?
You always cough when something is coming in.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, and the body chills and the coughing and the gagging and everything.
Yeah.
I don't do that quite as much as I used to, but it does rise in my body. All right. Truth is held within our divine form. And when truth is being spoken, we feel it. It's not something that our minds can decipher like the way we want to think. It'll come that way. It'll come through the great mind, right? The open mind. But the body knows. Mm-hmm. And, it's one of these themes that I'm moving along is like the re-establishing of our divine biology. Yeah. And it's directly aligned to what we've talked about so many times, Claudia, when you're in your moral upright, and I mean, even morals don't do it. When you're standing upright, when you're well developed, that sword has been so well hewn, then it reverberates. And so when negative comes at it, it just, sometimes it doesn't even need to say anything. Mm-hmm. And that is moving through the ethers, that is moving through the collective, that is moving people. And we're all touching each other. Mm-hmm. And it's quite beautiful.
It is.
Can I tell you something that happened yesterday for me? I don't know if video or not. I have a neighbor across the street, an older, very characteristic Mexican gentleman, right? And he likes to come talk to me, and he doesn't understand me, but he likes me. And he always tells me, you're really something. And, so he brought in these 3 people, and it was a family. It was the man and the woman and a young girl. And he bought coffees for them. And then our conversation was really disjointed. Like the energy just went, what is happening in here? And I couldn't even make coffees properly. So I was just doing my thing. And the woman, the wife, and the daughter had on masks, right? And so after one left, they're standing at my counter, and I'm like, would you take off your mask, please? And they did. And I said, I can see your faces. Look at you. You're beautiful.
Nice.
And then somehow the conversation started turning, right? And the man starts telling me that his daughter is clairvoyant and that his wife does hands-on healing. And then he pulls out his phone and he shows me, he's got a Mike Adams video that somebody had shared with him about graphene oxide. And I'm going, what am I dealing with here? Right? Really. And it was the unmasking of them that made the difference. Mm-hmm. And so we just had this heart on heart, like sharing and I gave them my thing, and that turns out they're vaccinated. And I'm looking at them going, why did you do that? You're telling me your daughter's clairvoyant and you're all in these mystery schools in Mexico City. Why would you do that? Just put it to them, right? And then the daughter was 17. And the whole time I'm talking, she's in her head just going, yes, yes, yes. So I just spent a little time with her at the end. And I said, you got vaccinated one time, and I don't know why. But I understand it, because this is a collective go along to get along. And, it turned out she's been rejected by all of her peers. She's the odd person out. Nobody. And I said, you owe it to yourself as who you are to investigate for you if that's the right thing to do, and then make an informed choice. Don't just do this to get along. I said, you're going to go. It was just like, I almost felt like I was prophetic. I said, you're going to go through many trials because you were given a great gift, but you're not alone. I said, all my life, I've myself and I've worked with people that were challenged. Well, you stand there in that you know, and it was beautiful in the end. And then they were like, oh, you know, and I just was like, it was such an odd encounter. And if I hadn't like spoken something to them, Claudia, and told them to take their mask off,
Yeah, it
I
wouldn't have
left my
happened.
shop and I would have thought, what an odd group of people, right?
Yeah.
And then we all decided, well, we may never see each other again, but something connected heart to heart with all of us. And I went, wherever you go, this conversation, and you will be with me and I'll be with you. And it was beautiful.
Yeah. I love when that happens.
Yeah. And I use this as an encouragement to others to not be afraid. I mean, really, how many people either get very angry or judgmental of somebody and they don't open themselves to the opportunity that's before them. And so it's an encouragement. Use these resonance of your voice to speak your truth. No ill can come from it.
Truth.
Anyways, I wanted to share that with somebody.
Thank you. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. So here we are. And just as it opened up for us over the last few days, and especially yesterday, that whole memory field, let's call it, that whole resonant field just opened up in a mind-blowing way yesterday.
Yeah, it did. I think, I need to mention here Robert Sieper.
Oh, right. Please.
Maybe we can put a link to his YouTube channel in the description, because he's an excellent scholar.
Mm-hmm.
And he's done research into the ancient history of Aryans and such.
Yeah.
I think that'll be useful to a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, he is.
If they don't know him yet.
Yeah, matter of fact, I downloaded that video and I'll probably edit in a clip from it here. And I find this extremely interesting and I don't have an answer for it. Oh, I made that sign. Somebody might say that it's bad. That throughout this in the video, and I will link it into the description and I will link it to the article, that throughout all, he's an anthropologist. And the interesting thing first about the swastika, it's in every single culture within this realm.
And very often right next to the Star of David.
Exactly. Exactly.
I love it.
I was just going to say that. So you have to like look at it. And here's another thing about symbols. People are all hung up about symbols. This one's evil. This one's good. This one's evil. No, friends, a symbol is a resonant message and they impart knowledge. Now that knowledge can be used for good or for evil. And so to find the Star of David and the swastika together in India, in China, all over the world, you go, wait a minute,
Beautiful.
something is up here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'll thread that little, just a little clip of that in here. But yeah, it was just, yeah, he's wonderful. He really is. And,
Yeah.
And he said something in the particular video you're talking about, depending on how you're looking at these ancient monuments and the artifacts and the things preserved from the Anunnaki, from Egypt, from the Scythians, from the Phoenicians, from the, all of those cultures, right? There's a thread that runs through it, but they're going to be interpreted differently by how you're looking at it.
Yeah.
The story is being told differently. And I
Absolutely.
think that's the harder part about so much information is they say that over there and they say that over there. And, so you have to ferment it within your own being so that it is an emergent truth within you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
I want to add here that, once you get to the stage where you want to live truth in every aspect, it does become easier to figure it out.
Mhm.
Because when there's a lie sort of sneaking in, you're going to go like, oh, hang on, something is wrong here.
Mhm.
Because you can feel it.
Mhm. Yeah, and sometimes it's not even from the person telling their perspective or their narrative. Sometimes it's not even a lie to them, but you can tell that there's a agenda behind what they're saying.
Yeah,
They're trying to convince you of something.
yeah, exactly.
And that comes across a lot in a lot of the Christian stuff that I listen to. And I mean, I get a lot out of everything, frankly. It's just that when you're pointing a finger, and I will read what I wrote and how this came in. When you're pointing a finger at other for evil, you are creating this disharmony.
Yeah.
You just are. And I think that's probably one of the deepest things within us. It's just that, oh, they're responsible. Oh, they did these horrible things. Oh, Adolf Hitler is the most evil man on the planet that ever lived. And there's nothing that could be further from the truth than that.
Truth.
So, my dear, thanks for being in my life.
Oh, thank you for being in my life.
I know. Yeah, so we'll continue along this vein.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and when I said along this vein, I thought bloodline vein, and then I thought a vein of gold.
Both.
I have a very active mind sometimes. But both
No,
are,
it's all very exciting.
there's a deep truth in that.
Yeah, yeah, there is.
That's why they want our blood. Don't give it to them. Don't contaminate yourselves. I just got chills, so I might as well say it, right? I can always edit it out. Oh, this whole thing about, pure bloods, right? Those of us that haven't taken the jab. And we know what this injection is doing to the people that are taking it. They're becoming infertile, they're dying, their hearts are giving out.
Changing their personality to the worst possible.
Right. So neurological problems, can't think straight. People are losing their sight now. It's just like, but when I think of the pure blood, and that's a little too political and too in your face for me, but it's okay. Those of us that haven't taken. But you know what I got, Claudia, right now? They need us to survive.
Well, yes.
Because they need to try to harvest us.
Yes. That's the whole thing with parasites.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They need a host.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people like online who express their hatred for them constantly.
Mm-hmm.
I can't, because whilst I'm not willing to let them feed from me,
Mm-hmm.
I hold no hate. They have a need to exist.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that very important, that you don't hold hate towards them and instead simply withdraw any and all consent.
Yeah. And, I just made a video about that. So I'm right there with you. And well, see, there is that whole mix up
You
thing,
know,
like where they've mixed everything up. They've mixed up the genetics, they've mixed up the
yeah.
races, they've mixed up the land masses, they've mixed up everything. So you're from Sudan, okay? And all of a sudden you find yourself in Sweden. How does that work in any harmonious and natural way?
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
And it's frightening, I mean, I work in an industry where I don't know people, but I see lots of different names of people in a given country. And let me tell you, Germany and Sweden, those two in particular, have more people named Mohammed and such than they do Søren or Hans.
Mhm.
And that's like, okay, so what happened to those countries?
Well, we know what happened,
Well, we know it.
Yeah, but how does, and so I guess our biggest challenge, if you want to put it in those terms, is how does a harmony get created out of this chaos? Like a true life-giving, uplifting harmony when what we're talking about, right? Displaced people.
Yes, absolutely. I have a very good friend.
Same everywhere. I mean, this is the whole
Yeah.
the whole thing happening in the United States right now is with the open borders policy and all that happened in Europe over the past years. It's like the flooding of the gate. And
Yeah, it is.
yeah, well, I mean, like, let this just be food for thought. Let our imaginations go. How does a harmony get created out of this? Like a true harmonic out of all of this? Love.
Yeah.
But what is that love? How do you hold that love? How do you be that love? How do you give yourself over and surrender to that to the extent that that will move mountains? It's for each person and each individual to find that within themselves.
Yes, it is. So going via truth is always a good start.
Yep.
I can't stress that enough because, I mean, I observe. I'm usually, when I'm not talking to you, I don't talk much. And I observe a lot. And it's like, there are as many people as there are opinions about what it means to live in truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that a bit concerning because there really, when it comes to truth, there's no compromise, there's no negotiation, because either you have truth or you don't. There's nothing like sort of truth, just like there is nothing like, being a little bit pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same concept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and within that, and I'm sure you observe it all the time, is that the truth that, let's just say, the mass of humanity up to date has lived by is a programmed truth. They think that's truth because they heard it on the television or because that's how they got raised culturally or whatever. They think that's truth.
Yeah, I read it in the history book, therefore it is true.
Woven in
I
on
read it in the textbook.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Say that again.
No, it's all right. Yeah, I read it in the history book, so it's true. Or I read it in the textbook that's given to schools, so it has to be true. Well, no, it was human beings who wrote those books too.
Yeah,
and they are opinionated, especially the ones who write textbooks.
So you just have to keep peeling away the falsehoods, because there is a thread of truth in everything and everybody. Right. But if you're operating, or you're speaking from a gender, you're speaking from, I'm going to convince you, or you know, this is my interpretation, therefore it should be everybody's interpretation. You know, you haven't quite.
My way or the highway.
Yeah. So, well, let's toast the new year in with a ring of truth.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Yeah, Happy New Year. And in the beautiful toast that we made last night, my friend said, power, just got really meditative, and she said, power, peace, and presence. And I said, and I later made it into a sentence, it's the power in the peace and the presence. And that becomes an absolute in its way. So something good to meditate on.
Absolutely.
I love you.